Taxes are always a touchy topic at the Idaho State House, especially when those taxes are the topic at another state house and might actually touch Idahoans. The state of Washington is considering adding an additional tax to fuel they send out of state, like to places like Idaho and Oregon. And you may be thinking, good move, Washington. You know, here in Idaho, we have 0 oil refineries in the state, and we depend on places like Washington for the gas to fill our tanks. But many others might be seeing this as more of taking advantage of a situation. Joe Paris spoke with Governor Brad Little and other state house leaders about the situation they find themselves in and what actions they're prepared to take.
There's growing frustration at the Idaho State House over a piece of legislation. Nothing new on that front. But this time, the legislation isn't from Idaho. It's from the state of Washington's legislature. A transportation and infrastructure package there includes a new 6-cent tax on fuel sent out of Washington to places like Idaho, Oregon, and Alaska.
Well, they had a little incident in Boston Harbor over tea about this about 250 years ago.
Idaho Governor Brad Little and other state leaders say the concept from the Washington legislature would essentially mean states like Idaho would be paying the bill for Washington's infrastructure package. Little and the Idaho Attorney General say they have legal concerns.
I don't think it's constitutional. I mean, the whole concept of our system is that you can't tax some other state. It's a violation of Commerce Clause. There's all kinds of things. The easiest thing is they just not do it.
Governor Little and Attorney General Lawrence Wasden sent this letter to Washington Governor Jay Inslee asking him to stop the added fuel tax on Idahoans. The letter asks Inslee to consider how the 6% tax would impact Idahoans already struggling with inflation and rising fuel costs. They write, quote, "If these proposals reach your desk, we ask you to veto them. Now is not the time for our states to turn on each other with excise tax proposals that dampen our economy and increase costs for everyone."
States can't treat states this way, and for good reason. We have the Commerce Clause in our Constitution.
House Speaker Republican Scott Bedke and members of the Idaho House are also pushing back on the legislation. They drafted this House Joint Memorial, which is essentially a message to Washington lawmakers, asking them to consider the great relationships in business and commerce between Idaho and Washington as they consider a fuel tax on Idahoans.
I understand the principle. You know, if you have a neighbor in a position where you can extort money, yeah, maybe. But neighbors don't do neighbors that way. We're alarmed. We don't think that friends and neighboring states should do each other this way, and we're looking at all of our options.
One of those options is to take this issue to a court of law. That can only happen if the legislation passes in Washington and Governor Inslee there signs it. If that does happen, Governor Little is confident that a court would side with Idaho.
I think they got bad legal advice. I think that's part of it. I think somebody told them they could do this, and you know, it's early, and we don't have any damages because they haven't implemented yet. But as soon as they do, we'll file suit. But if I need to, I'll call Governor Inslee.
Little adds that the Commerce Clause in the United States Constitution was specifically written for moments like these.
The reason the Articles of Confederation failed and we wrote the Constitution was because the 13 states were all acting totally independently in issues of commerce. And that's the foundation of our country, is that the United States of America, that the states only have jurisdiction in their states and not outside of their states.
Hold on, Joe. So what you're saying is the state of Idaho could actually be on the winning side of a constitutional law case with this if it goes forward?
Yeah, if it went that far, there's strong belief in the Idaho State House that Idaho would win this lawsuit.
Okay, so I want to ask you this, though, because we got a viewer who texted in this question to us earlier today. And with all this talk of Idaho pushing back on the Washington taxing the fuel coming into our state, just how much gas do we get as Idahoans from Washington State? Joe, you might know the answer to this.
And Brian, it can be tough to quantify and answer that question. So long story short, a lot of the gas from Washington does end up on the panhandle, but it is impossible to say, well, where does each drop of fuel end up in the state of Idaho, because it is transported and moved around. The point here, though, is regardless of the actual percentage of oil and fuel coming from, I should say gas, not oil, coming from Washington into Idaho, the question here is this is more about the principle, because let's say, for example, Idaho Idaho says, okay, we're not going to get our fuel from Washington, we'll go get it from Utah and Montana. What's stopping Utah and Montana from saying, well, we're going to do a 6% sales tax as well on the fuel going to Idaho? So the problem here is not necessarily the X's and O's and the ones and zeros on the payroll, but more about the principle of where this could go. And long story short, Brian, you could see a response from Idaho hypothetically saying, well, then we'll charge you something more. So tit for tat, that's not a great way to do business. Idaho lawmakers and Idaho leaders are hoping Washington just doesn't pass this and we don't have to cross a legal bridge.
And 6% is not a small number when it comes to taxing as much fuel as we send back and forth.
It's a lot, yeah.
Thank you very much, Joe.